Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this last but very important session of the special edition of KnowTalks, held live from the Frankfurt Book Fair 2024. In today's session, we will dive into how digital transformation can create inclusive development opportunities, and we will also be exploring trends like the future of banking, digital money, and economic opportunities. And I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Jaskaran Singh, who is a TEDx speaker and also digital transformation and fintech specialist. Jaskaran has worked across 5 countries, and he brings extensive experience in digital finance, development finance and fintech, and his work with leading institutions such as Deloitte, BNP Paribas, LBBW, and the World Bank has allowed him to explore digital pathways for inclusive development. So let's start with hearing from Jaskaran about his notion of digital inclusion, and I'll be back for the Q&A segment. Thank you, Jaskaran.
Of course. And thank you, Stephanie, for the great introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jaskaran, and it's a pleasure to be here. Firstly, many, many thanks to the colleagues at MBRF and the UNDP for inviting me here for this talk. And today, we will talk about something very crucial. It's about the use of technology to improve lives of people across the world. But before diving deep into it, I would like to start with a story. And this is probably the story of you today, or at least I hope you can resonate with this story. You woke up today in the morning, and you woke up with the sound of your alarm. You used your mobile phone to check some messages. You also used your mobile phone. You also used your mobile phone to look at your emails. And then it was time for you to have breakfast. So you ended up watching your favorite TV series or perhaps some news on the internet through your mobile phone or your television. Then it was time for you to come to the Frankfurt Messe. So you navigated your way to the Frankfurt Messe through using GPS on your mobile phone. We are almost finished from the lunch, and you paid for your delicious lunch through the mobile phone applications, your credit cards or debit cards. If you count your half of day, and you would realize of how much of technology that you've used throughout this day. And this gives us some kind of an impression that technology is ubiquitous. That means technology is available everywhere and accessible to everyone everywhere. However, now I would like to take you to different continents, and we'll hear another story. And this time, this is the story of a farmer in Africa. Well, he has to get up early in the morning. Why? Because he wants to irrigate his fields, water the crops. But there's a problem. There is no electricity for him to use the electric pump to water his crops. So what does he do? He ends up calling one of his friends from another nearby fields to get a generator. But there's a problem. His generator is not working, or the mobile phone through which he called, there are no signals on this mobile phone. And towards the evening, now it's the time to take the crops, the produce, and sell it in the market. And many people know that the farmer went to sell his produce in the market. And as a result, he would be coming back home with cash, which probably could also lead to bad outcomes, right? Because if many people know that he's sold his crops and he's coming back home with cash, it could perhaps lead to some anxiety and fear as well. Had he had the possibility of accepting digital payments, this would have been much more easier for him as well. But there's a problem. There are no banks nearby. There is no possibility to open bank accounts, for example. Now, if you compare your day with the day of the farmer in Africa, you would realize that it paints a completely different picture. Technology is not available to everyone across the world in an equal way. Somebody has access to technology more than the others. And this shows us some kind of gap. It shows us some kind of divide. And this is nothing but something which is called the digital divide. So digital divide is basically a definition that tells you that there is a society or people across the world do not have access to technology equally. There are gaps. So it divides our society between the digital haves and the digital have-nots. Well, we looked at digital divide through these two stories, but I would also like to take you to some empirical evidence which gives also an indication that the digital divide is real and it exists in our society. So the evidence states that as of 2022, and this is from the World Bank report, there are 2.7 billion people across the world who do not have access to internet. They are completely cut off from the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 1 in 4 persons across the world who do not have access to internet. And if we put this into the perspective of high and low-income countries, we realize that 90% of people in high-income countries have access to internet, whereas this number is just 25% in low-income countries. I would like to take you to another metric that we have. And as of 2022, 400 million people are not covered by a mobile broadband signal. 400 million people, ladies and gentlemen, that's equivalent to the population of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy combined. They do not have access to a mobile broadband signal. And let's put this again into the perspective of high income and low income countries, and we see that 8% of the people in high income countries have those small basic feature phones that you might have seen or heard about. Whereas this number is significantly high in low income countries where almost 50% of the population is using those feature phones, those small keypad phones, which also shows that the access to smartphones is also not that much in the low income countries. So this is the empirical evidence, and it clearly suggests that there is a digital divide. So the question is, how do you solve this digital divide, or how do you bridge the gap with this digital divide? Well, it's not that complicated, and we'll come to the answer of that question a little bit later. But first, I would like to take you through the building blocks of digital development. So in this case, we have this technology pyramid. Basically, these are the different layers of digital development. We start with the basic layer, which is the digital infrastructure, or also called the core digital infrastructure. This includes mobile broadband towers. This also includes electricity, power grids, factories that produce electricity, factories that produce batteries, even the hardwares that are being used as part of different devices. This is the digital infrastructure which fuels the entire economy above that. Then we go to the second layer. The second layer is the digital services and the digital skills. Well, digital services basically mean, for example, the mobile phone applications that you have on your phones, or for example, a computer connected to an internet. Well, firstly, you need to have electricity for a computer to work, right? So that's the importance of the core digital infrastructure. And then also the most important part here is the skills part. You need to have a computer for someone to be able to learn how to use a computer in the first place. So that's why skills become very, very crucial when we talk about technology. And finally, the topmost layer, which is digital inventions and explorations. So this is everything related to research and development that is being done when it comes to the advanced technologies such as blockchain and AI and many others for that matter. And this entire pyramid becomes even more interesting when we add these 3 dimensions to it, which is the policy, people, and planet. So what does policy basically means? Well, that basically means that you create policies in such a way that they foster the development of the core digital infrastructure. This could be the broadband towers. This could also be the power grids or factories that produce electricity and hardwares. Coming to the element of people. So people in this case means that any technology that gets developed needs to be developed in a very people-centric way. It needs to keep people at the core of all these technologies. People should be able to benefit from these technologies. And last but not the least is the aspect of planet. So any technology that is being built needs to be built in such a way that it does no harm to the environment. If there is a development plan or a developing technology that leads to excessive pollution, excessive energy use, or it leads to deforestation, well, in that case, we need to revisit that digital technology development plan. We need to reach the optimum where we get the maximum benefits from technology. And at the same time, we minimize any kind of risks to the planet, any kind of risks to our environment. And it is actually the interplay of these three dimensions within the technology pyramid, which is very, very important for digital development. And I would also like to take you through some of the examples, real examples in countries which are fostering this kind of digital development while keeping policy, people, and planet at the center. For example, the World Bank and the African Development Bank are partnering to provide 300 million people in Africa with access to electricity. A project that is targeting the bottommost layer of the technology pyramid, which is the core digital infrastructure, while keeping policy, people, and planet at center. The next example, where UNDP and the MBRF have introduced the program called Future Skills for All initiative that is focusing on providing skills to the workforce, including also the digital skills. In this case, they are targeting the second layer of technology pyramid while keeping policy, people, and planet at the core. Next one is USAID. They have developed a digital innovation venture, which is promoting innovators and developers to explore new technologies, to research into new technologies and build new digital solutions. In this case, they are targeting the topmost layer, which is the digital inventions and digital explorations in the technology pyramid, while keeping policy, planet, and people at the center. Now, these are some of the real tangible examples of how this interplay of different layers along with the dimensions play a crucial role. But now, do you remember I told you that we will talk about ways of how we can bridge this gap, how we can tackle digital divide? And now I'm coming to the answer of that question. And again, this is no rocket science. It's not complicated. This could be done in easy and simple ways. So simple success factors. That's a term that I'm introducing to you. I also call it the SSF. These are simple factors that could ensure that any kind of technology that gets developed is being developed in a digital and inclusive way while catering for people, while catering for planet, while catering for other kind of policies as well. So first and foremost, let me take you to the first SSF, which is functionality. Well, any kind of technology that you develop, it needs to serve its basic function. If it is an online banking app, well, in the first place, it should allow you or enable you to conduct financial transactions and in a simple and frictionless way. If this app is not able to serve its very purpose, then probably there's no point of developing that kind of an app. And at the same time, it's not just about the basic functionality, but there is also an element which is called the value-added services on top. So your technology should be built in such a way that there could be other value adds that can be built on top of that technology. So this technology should be interoperable or different technologies should be able to get integrated to this basic technology as well. Coming to the second factor, which is connectivity. Some people also call it IoT, or Internet of Things. Well, this is basically different devices, technology devices, speaking to each other. And what happens is that this leads to tremendous benefits. How is that the case? Let me give you an example. If there is just one telephone in the entire world, do you think that it would create any value for anyone? Perhaps not, right? Because the main function of a telephone is to call another person. But if there is just one telephone in the world, it is of no use to anyone because you need a second telephone to call the other person. In such a way, you create a network of devices. You create a network which leads to tremendous benefits amongst people. Let me give you that example of the farmer in Africa who we were talking about. What if this farmer had a smartphone and had internet connectivity and a mobile application, and along with that, a device that is measuring the soil moisture and the precipitation in the atmosphere? And based on that, the technology behind gives an estimate to the farmer of how much water is needed, when it is needed the most, and as a result, this helps into the end-to-end automation of the entire process of irrigating the crops. Now think about the benefit from coming from manual labor to an automated economy. This is what connectivity, interoperability, and Internet of Things can offer. So the next factor is affordability. You can create the best of the best technology in the world. However, if this technology is too expensive, it is not within the reach of the people, this would be of no use to anyone. So this technology needs to be accessible to the people from a cost perspective. And not just from a cost perspective, but also from a skills perspective. A technology will also not be beneficial if people are unable to use this because people do not possess the right skills to use it. That's why I'm also deliberately laying focus also on the skills part related to reskilling and upskilling of the workforce of the people, because then that would ensure that they are able to use technology. Coming to the final and the last success factor, which is responsibility. Any technology that gets built needs to be built in such a way that it keeps the fundamental human rights of the people at its core. So it ensures that the rights of the people are protected. Technology is built in a responsible and ethical way, especially when we talk about new and upcoming technologies such as AI. So with this, these were some of the success factors. And of course, they might sound basic and simple, but that's exactly the point, because they can then help to create digital and inclusive technologies that really lead to benefits for people. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a very rapidly changing world. New technologies are coming in and day out. It is extremely difficult to regulate these new technologies in a comprehensive way because they are evolving very quickly. So technology could be used for good, and we've seen some examples of how technology is being used in good ways by different organizations to empower people. However, technology misuse is also prevalent, where technology gets misused for the purpose of cyber attacks or for the purpose of privacy infringements and so on and so forth. And after all, it will depend upon us, the people, in terms of the values that we have, the principles that we have, and the ethics as to how we develop these technologies. Towards the end, I would like to conclude by quoting Samantha Power, the administrator of the USAID, and this is a speech that she did at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in July 2024. And Samantha Power said, "The actions we take now will determine whether this next age of technological advances will bring more inequality, exploitation, subjugation, or whether it will connect more people across the world to essential services, to economic opportunities, and to each other. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Jaskaran. Very insightful. And also thank you for sharing the USAID administrator's quote in the end. We have many questions, so I'll start. But first, do we have perhaps any questions from the live audience? I will start, but later on, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. So, Jaskaran, in your presentation, you touch on this digital divide with 2.7 billion people who are unconnected to the internet. What do you think are the most significant barriers to digital access that you have observed, particularly in low-income countries?
No, that's a good question. And again, I think I would like to stress on some of those factors that we've seen also in the presentation. One of them being really affordability. It is very, very difficult for people in low-income countries, especially the people who are belonging from low-income households, to be able to access a smartphone, for example. They cannot buy that smartphone because the technology is just so expensive. And as a result, they remain digitally excluded. So I think affordability is indeed one of the major challenges when it comes to access. There's another challenge, and again, I would like to lay stress on the digital skills part. A lot of effort and work needs to be done when it comes to promoting digital skills amongst the people. So these digital skills are something that enable people to use the technology for whatever purpose they want to use it. So it's very, very crucial that this digital skills divide also gets addressed. And last but not the least, I would also like to mention about the gender divide, and it seems it goes hand in hand with digital divide as well. So based on a report from Roland Berger, it was stated that women are more likely to be digitally excluded than men. So even from a gender divide perspective, it is crucial to look at digital exclusion and how it could lead to digital exclusion, and how we can incorporate strategies which could lead to digital inclusion from a gender perspective as well.
Thank you. You touched on the importance of digital skills, and you also mentioned the Future Skills for All initiative that will now be expanding to become a Future Skills Academy. And but at the same time, we know that digital literacy is still a significant barrier, especially for underserved communities. How do you think governments and organizations can scale digital literacy programs to ensure that everyone can meaningfully engage with the digital world?
I think I have one word answer for that, and that's policy. Policy needs to be created in such a way that it is enabling people to learn those skills which are needed for operating technology. And these skills are relevant and important, not just right now, but also in the future, because these people, once they get trained into digital skills, will they be then able to contribute to the digital economy? So I cannot lay any more stress on digital skills, because that's really coming at the heart when it comes to digital inclusion. What I would also like to say is some very, very interesting initiatives which have been taken by many countries, especially in the MENA region. So for example, the government of UAE has developed their digital economy plan, and this was already developed in 2022 to increase the share of income of the digital economy into the overall income of the country, into the overall GDP of the country. We've seen some very creative ways. For example, Tunisia has broadcasted digital courses over television to the students. And they have also provided free laptops and free internet connection. So there are various ways of how governments can do this. This could be done in the form of policies. This could also be done in the form of incentives and subsidies that can be created by governments, and especially also within the MENA region. So that's the Middle East and North Africa region.
And do you think governments have this political will?
That's another good question. I think it's more related to the people as well, right? So there might be some cultural aspects to it as well, but from a political perspective, the policies that can be created are immense. There is immense potential for policies to be created to create these kind of programs for the people, for the citizens. And we've seen those examples. And we are also seeing a lot of international collaboration that has been done at scale. For example, some of the organizations which were also presented during the presentation. So in a way, there has been a lot of efforts. And I think to some extent, this also leads to domino effects. So if one country sees the government of another country, which is very active when it comes to digital economy, this leads to a domino effect where other countries follow as well. So I think this is how digital skills gap has been bridged across many countries. And I think there are many countries which are taking a lead at it and many, many other countries which are also very active when it comes to exploring advanced technologies such as AI and blockchain, which have been talked about at this point quite a lot. So I think overall, there is a willingness to move towards a digital economy, but then there are barriers as well, and we've discussed some of those barriers. So I think the trust element is very crucial. So trust in the technology, trust in the government, because this is something which will rapidly increase adoption of these digital technologies as well.
Thank you, Jaskaran. Your presentation highlighted major global partnerships, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the role of the private sector and how can local businesses and startups contribute to building digital ecosystems that support inclusive development, particularly through homegrown innovations?
So I wouldn't say that it's the task only of the private sector or only of the public sector. I would rather say that this is a public-private partnership or public-private cooperation. So I think the private sector efforts go hand in hand with the policies which are created by the public sector as well, by the government. So I think this really is a collaboration and a cooperation. From a private sector perspective, in terms of how you can increase these digital skills, I think there are some really interesting and really good programs that some companies have been employing in terms of mandatory trainings, or they are also employing a lot of educational programs, a lot of awareness when it comes to these technologies. And some companies have been doing it because they know that a digitally literate workforce will be very, very crucial and immensely helpful when it comes to the success of the company as well. So the employers are very, very well aware of it. The private sector is aware of it, and they are taking some really, really good initiatives in different shapes and forms in order to improve digital skills of their employees and of the people overall as well.
Thank you. You mentioned the role of infrastructure and of digital services for inclusive development, but I'm also curious, and also the audience is curious about the role of human-centered design. How do you think digital solutions can be tailored to the specific needs of underserved communities to ensure they are truly impactful and accessible?
I think you are exactly hitting the nail, the user-centric design, or basically the user-friendliness of the technology. This is not just about the technology, but it is also about how this technology is going to be perceived by people, how this technology is going to be used by people. So I think there are many different elements at play when we talk about technology and how easy or difficult it is for people to use or operate the technology. I have seen many examples where technology is built in such a way that it is very difficult or complex to understand. So we've seen some websites, for example, which are developed by especially government websites in many cases. They may be there, but they perhaps are very, very difficult to navigate, or they may not be accessible all the time. So I think the resilience of technology, how robust the technology is, that really leads to the trust amongst the people when it comes to using technology. So it's not just the functionality part of the technology, but also the design and the user friendliness of technology in terms of how people perceive this technology, and of course the skills that they have in order to access technology. So given that there are different people across the world who may have different digital skills, your technology needs to accommodate for those kind of skills amongst people. So really keeping the technology user-centric, enabling the basic functionality, but of course, having always that perspective of future in terms of how your technology can serve the people, not just today, but also in future.
Fantastic. And what do you think is missing from this equation of digital inclusion, especially in the Arab States region? Or how can digital inclusion be fostered in the Arab States?
I think per se, there is nothing missing. I would rather call it in such a way that more can be done when it comes to technology, when it comes to promoting technology amongst the people, when it comes to the digital skills as well. I think this perspective that technology should be built in such a way that it is technology not just useful today, but also useful tomorrow. This kind of mindset needs to be taken into consideration so that we are really building the technologies for tomorrow that will still stand the test of time and not get redundant with the new technologies coming in. So that's where I think this element of interoperability or creating a technology design which is resilient also in the future is very, very important. So I think from that perspective, I would say focusing on technology, which is helpful not just for today, but also focusing on technologies that can create tremendous benefits to the citizens also in the future.
Thank you. To keep things engaging, I'm going to end with a this or that segment with quick questions, this or that questions, and I appreciate short answers. So blockchain for development or AI for development?
Both go hand in hand.
Okay. Digital banking or traditional banking?
Digital banking, for sure.
Smart cities or rural digital transformation?
I think given that we've seen within the low-income countries and low-income population groups, there is a need to advance technology. So I would say, especially the rural development would play a major role when it comes to digital inclusion. So rural access to technology for sure.
Thank you. Universal basic income or microfinance solutions?
Universal basic income.
Thank you. I appreciate that there was only one both. Thank you. So thank you, Jaskaran, for this fascinating talk. And like your efforts are very well appreciated towards digital inclusion. We are also wrapping up the special edition of KnowTalks from the Frankfurt Book Fair. I thank all our speakers, including Jaskaran, of course, and also our audience, the live audience, and the audience joining us online. And I'd also like to thank our interpreters, and our interpreters for the day, they were Abdel Halim and Monse. Thank you so much. And thank you to our colleagues in the background.